When I first went independent, I said yes to almost everything. A call request that landed during an afternoon I'd blocked off. Fine, I'll make it work. A meeting in the run up to Christmas when the kids were already home from school. Of course. A consultation during what was supposed to be a holiday week. Let me just check the time difference for you. And look, at the start, that did make sense, but only at the start. I'm Anna Lindberg, and I've spent over a decade working with founders and solopreneurs on exactly this pattern. The moment when the flexibility that made sense at the beginning becomes a thing that's actually working against you. In this video, I want to talk about why that happens and what actually shifts it. If that's useful, please do subscribe to follow along as I share more. When you're in the first year or two of building something for yourself, you're in discovery mode. You don't yet know what will work. You're figuring out your market, your offer, what kind of clients you actually enjoy working with. Energy is high. Everything feels possible. Saying yes widely in that phase isn't reckless. It's actually how you learn. It's how you build the early relationships and early income that give you something to work with. The problem isn't the yes phase. The problem is what happens next. Because for most people, the yes phase never officially ends. There's no moment where someone taps you on the shoulder and says, right, you've established yourself now, you know what works, you can start being more selective and say no. You just keep going. The pattern that made sense in year one becomes the default, and 3, 4, 5 years in, you're operating exactly the same way you did at the beginning, except now you know what it costs, you know what you're giving up, and you do it anyway. That's when the freedom starts to feel like a myth. Let me tell you what this looked like for me specifically. I had blocked time in my calendar. Afternoons when the kids were home from school, proper holidays, the weeks running up to Christmas, and I had a pattern of saying yes to call requests that landed right in the middle of those windows. Not because clients were pushing, they really weren't. They'd suggest a time, I'd see it clash with something I'd protected, and I'd say yes anyway. Because being flexible felt like part of the deal, because it felt unprofessional to say no, because the money was real and I didn't want to lose it, honestly. What I noticed over time was that I started dreading those bookings before they even happened. I'd be with the kids, but not really with them, half present, waiting, anxious about my own focus going into the call. Then, more often than you'd think, the client would cancel at the last minute and I'd have given up the afternoon for nothing. The resentment started off quite quietly. Then it wasn't so quiet. I had built this business specifically to be present for the people that really mattered, to protect my energy, to have a life that didn't eat itself. And I was voluntarily putting meetings right in the middle of it, meetings that often didn't even happen. That's when I first noticed I hadn't escaped the pattern, I just moved it. Here's what I think is actually happening when this occurs. And I want to say clearly, it doesn't mean you made the wrong choice going independent. It means you brought something with you that you didn't realize you were carrying. When we spend years inside corporate environments, we absorb beliefs about how work works. Being responsive equals being valuable. Visible effort is how you prove commitment. The person who's always available is reliable. The person who guards their calendar is difficult. These beliefs don't care that you've handed in your notice. They came with you. And in corporate, there were structures, finish times, other people leaving the building, a commute that was transition time, an HR policy or two that created some friction against these beliefs running at full speed. As a solopreneur, those structures are gone. The beliefs run unchecked, which is why the person who was intense in corporate often becomes more intense as a solopreneur, not less. All the friction that slowed them down has now been removed. And there's a specific pressure that comes with having built this yourself. When you're employed and exhausted, there's always a version of, this is what they're asking of me. When you've built this yourself and you're exhausted, you're both the person who's burned out and the one who designed the conditions. That accountability loop is entirely internal. In my experience, that's actually more draining than having a really demanding manager. Let me name the specific beliefs I see most often because they're usually running in the background without being examined. The first is being available equals being valuable. This is common in people from service businesses, client-facing roles, corporate cultures that rewarded the visible, responsive person. It shows up as answering messages at 9 p.m, not because you want to, but because not answering feels like saying something about your commitment. The second is, I'm the one who always delivers. This is actually an identity, not just a habit, which means saying no or putting a boundary around your delivery or lowering the stakes of something doesn't feel like a work decision. It feels like a threat to who you are, so you over-deliver every time, regardless of cost. The third is a serious business looks a certain way. The LinkedIn feed, the announcements, the growth updates, without meaning to, you start running your own business against that image. And the image is always of someone who is always on, always building, always moving. None of these beliefs are irrational. They were probably adaptive in the environment where you picked them up. The question worth sitting with is whether you'd consciously choose them now for this version of your business and this version of your life. The instinct when you recognise this pattern is usually to add more structure. New calendar rules, stricter hours, a policy about not taking calls on certain days, and sometimes these help, briefly, but then the pattern reasserts itself. Because a rule sitting on top of an unchanged belief will lose to that belief. The belief has been there longer, it's had more practice. Every time a call comes in during block time and the rule says no, but the belief says being available is how I prove my value, the belief wins. Adding more rules to a belief problem is just rearranging the furniture. The room looks different, but the problem is still there. What I found in my own experience and in the work I do with people at this stage is that the examination is what's changing things, not intellectually clocking the pattern as such, but actually asking, where did this come from? Maybe a first manager who modelled it, a culture that rewarded the last person to leave, a period when being maximally available was genuinely necessary. But importantly, is it still true? Is it still serving you? That examination is really hard to do alone, not because you're not self-aware. Most people doing this work are very self-aware. They can describe the pattern in detail, but you're inside it, and from inside, you can't quite see what's underneath. The conversations that shift things tend to happen in rooms with people who are close enough to the territory to understand what you're describing and removed enough from your day-to-day to be able to name what they see. People who won't panic when you say you're thinking about cutting your client load or raising prices or turning down something that looks impressive from the outside because they know what that decision actually means. That room is what I've been building with Offscript, a community for established independents who've chosen their own version of success and want peers who've made something like the same choice. Not to be given more content or another framework to implement, to think out loud with people who get it. Doors for Offscript open 1st of June for the July intake. Link is in the video description if you want to find out more. And if you're not quite there yet, stay with me. I'm going to keep making videos on the patterns underneath the business and what it actually takes to change them. Subscribe so you don't miss a thing.